Hello, everyone. This is Krish again, and I am back with the second season of my podcast series, MoneyWise for Teens. In this season, I will be talking with personal finance experts who will share their stories and experiences with us and will guide us with strategies for financial freedom and success. Today, we have with us our first guest, Mr. Joshua Sheats, the voice and face of the popular podcast Radical Personal Finance. Mr. Sheets is a leading expert and financial planner in the US and has been running a very successful financial podcast for the last 11 years with about 1,200 episodes covering various aspects of personal finance. He teaches normal people like us on how to seamlessly connect the science of financial planning with the joy of goal achievement. Backed with multiple advanced academic degrees, Mr. Sheets has been helping people achieve financial freedom by simplifying the complex topics of money and by providing accurate information, practical tips and tricks, and strategies for achieving their goals quickly and more efficiently. Today, we're going to dive into his story and get some great advice for teens who are about to make a start of their financial journey and big decisions about their future. So let's begin. Welcome to MoneyWise for Teens, Mr. Sheets. It's so good to have you with us today. How are you doing this morning?
Very well. Thank you so much for having me.
So, Mr. Sheets, would you like to tell us about your journey so far and how did it start?
Well, with regard to my journey, especially with money and personal finance, it started when I was a teenager because I was interested in trying to figure out how to become wealthy. When I was a boy, I grew up in a family that was a middle class family. My dad was an engineer, and but so he had a decent income, but my parents also had seven children, so we never had a whole lot of extra. And so, as an example, in those days, when our family drank orange juice, it came in a frozen concentrate that we mixed up as orange juice. And my mom made maple syrup with corn syrup and maple flavoring because we didn't have enough money to buy the real maple syrup from maple trees. So we never lacked for anything, but we were never particularly wealthy. And when I was younger, I was quite a reader, and I started reading books about money just as I browsed around the library, and I realized, hey, this money thing shouldn't be so difficult. So I started reading books about personal finance, and I realized that in the United States of America, anybody who wants to can become wealthy. I started to understand a little bit about compound interest and realized that if I just saved some money from an early age, that I could become a millionaire over the course of my working career, and that inspired my interest. So, through a variety of twists and turns, after college, I wound up working in the world of professional financial advice and financial services, and then later on became a financial podcaster. And that's what I've been doing for the last 11 years now, trying to help, as you said in the introduction, bring together kind of the science of deep level financial planning with the actionability of personal finance advice to try to help people get better results faster.
Wow, that's really inspiring. So, talking about your teenhood, what's one experience from your teen years that shaped who you are today?
I would adjust the question slightly and cheat as I answer it and say, instead of one experience, I would say one theme of experience has made a big difference. For me, something that was enormously helpful to me as a teenager was that I had a lot of extremely diverse experiences, especially related to working at various jobs, running businesses, and all of the connections and lessons that I learned in those different activities. When I was a teenager, my father always encouraged his children to get a summer job. We had some financial commitments to him to help out, and he encouraged us to work. So, starting probably from about the age of 13 or so, every summer I had some kind of summer job. And also, my dad would work really hard to try to find opportunities for us to have casual work. So, if a friend was building a house, then we would go and be carpentry helpers for a few days. And so along the way, I worked during high school at literally, I guess I can't say dozens, but over a dozen different jobs. And that diversity of experience was enormously helpful for me. I mowed grass on doing lawn maintenance services. I did carpentry work. At one time, I had a job working at a boat dealership, washing boats. That was my Saturday job for a year. And I met all kinds of different people. I also pursued various business things. I sold things, got involved in one random network marketing thing where I learned to try to figure out how to sell things. And so what I discovered as I got older is I had a much different and more diverse set of experiences than a lot of my peers did. And that different and diverse set of experiences caused me to really be several years ahead of some of my friends and peers in terms of personal maturity and in terms of a sense of who I was. I knew what I liked and what I didn't like. I remember in seventh grade, for example, I spent a summer working as a helper for a tile contractor, which means basically that I carried lots of boxes of tile and I mixed up lots of buckets of thin set, and I spent time doing simple work like grouting tile floors. Well, after spending various days working on my hands and knees grouting tile floors and chipping up, old floors with a chipping hammer, I kind of realized that this is not the kind of work that I particularly myself really want to do. And I remember at that time, even that was my first time making real money. And my dream at that time was to buy a 1995 Dodge Ram 2500 or 3500 big four-wheel drive vehicle. And at the time, those were selling for like $13,000. And I sat there and calculated my wages. I think I was earning $7.25 an hour at the time as a helper. And I sat and calculated my wages, and I realized there's no way that I can accomplish my goal of buying this big four-wheel drive pickup truck I want to buy at $7.25 an hour. And I talked to the tile mechanics about how much they earned, and I realized that if I'm going to be able to reach my financial goals, I'm going to have to earn a lot more per hour than $7.25 an hour. And so those experiences and that diversity of experience over time is something that really shaped me into who I am and gave me much more self-confidence, much more personal insight than a lot of my peers have.
That's a really powerful story, and I find that very inspiring. So, if you could go back in time and give your teenage self one piece of advice, what would it be and why?
The advice I would give is simply this: say yes. So, as a teenager, when somebody offers something to you, the answer should always be yes. The default should be yes. Now, of course, there are things that you aren't able to do. There are times in which you're not going to be able to pursue something, but you should say yes to every opportunity that comes your way. If somebody says, "Hey, would you like to go out and do such and such a thing? Let's go out on a social engagement." You should say yes. You don't know who's going to be there. You don't know who you're going to meet. If somebody says, "Would you like to have this job?" You say yes, because getting in the habit of saying yes when opportunity comes your way is a really important habit that winds up opening doors for you and putting connections together in a way that you wouldn't otherwise know about. I get really concerned, especially for teenagers. I get really concerned when I hear teens that spend a lot of time in introspection, trying to get to know myself and think about what I like and what I don't know or what I don't like. I look at some teens that I've counseled in that situation. I say, "Friend, I appreciate that you want to sit around and gaze at your navel, but you don't have anywhere near enough life experience to make solid judgments." So all along in your teens and in your 20s, the default answer that you give to any time somebody says, "Hey, would you like to?" or "Would you be interested in?" is say yes. Now, saying yes doesn't commit you to something. There are jobs that I took that I worked a week at, and after a week I discovered, hey, this is not for me, and I quit and moved on. It's no big deal to take a job for a week, work there, and then quit and move on. You'll be much better off if you do that than if you don't say yes in the first place. But you want to be consistently saying yes when opportunity comes your way, because that's the pathway that you wind up putting together a set of personal experiences that distinguish you from other people, that differentiate you. And so saying yes to unusual experiences in my life is what has led me to be very different from other people. And when I observe people whose default answer is, "Well, I just don't feel like it." Of course, we'd all rather sit around at home and do nothing rather than face the difficulty of going out to a social engagement and meeting somebody new. Of course, we'd all rather sit around at home and be lazy instead of going out and joining somebody on a hike or trying a new sport we've never tried or going and trying a job that doesn't sound all that interesting and might disrupt something else. But when you're young, you're trying to collect as many diverse experiences as possible so you have an idea of what the world may offer to you, and then you can see how those different experiences resonate with you over time.
That's very interesting. I completely agree that without trying, you'll never know what you'd like to do in your future. So, with that, our next question, what habits or routines helped you stay focused and achieve success?
When you're young, there are just a few basic fundamentals, and they're all the things that you already know you should be engaged in. So there are some fundamentals of learning that you really should engage with. So first and foremost, it's important to be an interested learner. Establishing and maintaining the habit of being a learner is core to advancements in life. Nobody advances to the highest levels of success without being a committed learner. You can learn in many different ways. The natural and obvious place to start is with academics, formal academics. Being skilled in formal academics will take you very, very far. And in the modern age, those skills in formal academics are necessary to open so many doors of life. And so you want to be a committed learner in formal academics. You also want to look at things like formal academics and say, well, what can I learn that would help me to learn these things more effectively? So, learning how to be a learner, studying learning science, figuring out how to be effective at actually learning information faster is a core meta skill that you really should spend time on developing. So, everything related to learning, areas of personal interest. If you're interested in something, run it down to its absolute extreme. One thing that has paid off well for me is whenever I'm interested in something, I go and pursue it until I stop being interested in it. So sometimes in life, you have to study things you're not particularly interested in, and you can develop an interest in how you study those things. So it's always possible to be engaged in learning, even if you're not engaged in the actual topic at hand. You can focus on doing a good job with it, or even just observing how you're actually engaging with the topic so that you can get better. But ultimately, you want to spend most of your time pursuing the things that you yourself are actually interested in. And so interest takes you a long way. Then there are all of the other core habits. So social habits are really, really important. Learning how to be good with people is such a fundamental skill that it's something that should be studied and should be practiced consistently. Being good with people means mastering yourself, not being obnoxious to other people, not flying off the handle emotionally, learning how to dominate your emotions and control yourself. You want to study how you present yourself so that you present yourself to others in ways that are winsome and engaging with them rather than ways that can cause others to be repulsed by you. Studying people and learning how to be a skilled listener is an absolutely fundamental skill. Studying the science of human relationships so that you understand how to affect people, how to influence people effectively. All of these skills should be studied. And then there's a whole set of physical habits that really should be mastered. And so studying physical health, learning how to maintain physical health, fitness, learning how to maintain brain health is fundamental. And so really taking an interest in your body is key. And there are more as well, but those are the fundamental skills and habits that if you develop them, they take you very far in life.
That's a really unique perspective. I completely agree with you. So, what's one financial decision you made that's had the biggest positive impact on your life?
The thing that's paid off the most has always been the money that I have spent on education. When you are young, you have a lot of time and not a lot of money. And so the key is to invest your time and what money you have into developing your earning ability. I missed this early on. I started to pay attention to the magic of compound interest. I'm sure that you've talked with your listeners about how, if you can save $2,000 a year starting at the age of 15, and you save $2,000 a year from, say, 15 to 22, and then you stop saving for the rest of your life, and then you just let compound interest go for the next few decades, in many cases, you'll be far and away so much ahead financially of people who later save tens of thousands of dollars every year due to the power of compound interest. That's easy to see financially. But what's not often seen is how much more powerful skills and knowledge and ability can compound over time. And so when you're young, you basically want to take every dollar that you possibly can accumulate and you want to invest it into yourself until you literally can't figure out how to invest money into yourself anymore. And so you might start a library, but then pretty quickly you should have a pretty big book budget. And so being serious about purchasing the books that you need, purchasing the audiobooks that you need that will advance you to the next level is really key. Enrolling in classes that are of interest to you. Of course, you'll have your standard academic classes, and those will be important, but then there may be other classes. And so investing into classes. When you look at investing into doing well in those classes, you should always be looking to say, is there a tutor who could help me to be really excellent in this class? Or is there a piece of software that would really enhance my results? So today, with hindsight, I look at my teenage years and I messed up so much with my academics because I tried to do it myself. I never even considered hiring a tutor. Today, the first thing I would do if I was having any trouble whatsoever with something would be to find some kind of software solution so that I can have extra practice. So, for example, if I'm studying math in high school, I want to make sure that I'm using an online math program like Math Academy, and I would basically want to pre-study all of the classes that I'm taking in a formal academic environment. So if you're going to take Algebra 2 or calculus this year in high school, the goal is to have already studied the Algebra 2 textbook or already have completed the calculus textbook the year before. Because when you're a really star student, nobody needs to know whether you're a star student just because you're just naturally brilliant or whether you happen to be already have gone through this class the year before. And so when you're a star student, that's where all of the opportunities open to you. That's where you get all the great recommendations from your teacher, which opens up the best colleges for you. That's where you get all the recommendations for you to get a great internship that opens up the best relationships and the best skills that you can build. So you want to spend money, even if you're spending your own money, on those kinds of things. And then you want to spend money on experiences. So it can be very tempting to say, well, I just need to save this money when I'm young in order that I have more money for compound interest. Okay, that's fair, and I can't say that that's the wrong thing. But if I had a chance to spend $1,000 to go to some amazing camp for a week where I can learn about something that I'm interested in and develop a new set of skills there, I would rather spend it on camp and make connections there with people and build new skill sets than just have the money. So the basic mental model, at least that I teach to my children and try to teach to all teens, is spend money on yourself and invest into yourself and into your skills, into your knowledge, into your ability until you can't figure out how to do that anymore. And what will happen is if you do that, then you'll wake up at, say, 30 years old, 25 years old, 30 years old, and instead of making $50,000 or $80,000 a year, you're making $300,000 a year, $500,000 a year, or millions of dollars a year. And now everything financial is easy.
That's such a great point. Like, whenever I'm making my budget, I'm always considering what's the point of having so much money in the long run if you don't invest it in yourself and live in the moment. I think that it's such a big factor for people to know how much to use on themselves, how much to invest, and what portion to leave for the future. So now, how do you handle setbacks or failures? And what's the biggest lesson you've learned from one?
I think the most important thing to learn about setbacks and failures is to embrace them rather than to reject them. So failure is inevitable. Right? There is no way to avoid failure. And in fact, I think there is an optimal rate of failure. And the optimal rate of failure is something that's much, much greater than zero. So let's imagine, for example, that you and I were looking at a friend of yours. And this is a friend, let's pretend he's 16 or 17 years old, and he's just seems super capable, but he never fails at anything. Question for you. If you had that friend who never failed at anything, would you think that that friend is living up to his potential?
No, I just don't think he's trying enough and that he should make a greater effort. Because like as you said, failure is inevitable and that's how you learn.
Right. So let's use school for example. Now, here we have a very frustrating paradox. Grades are desperately important. So it's very important that you get high grades. So what that can cause people to do, however, is to say, well, the pathway to getting high grades is to take easy classes. So if that friend of yours goes and signs up for a whole bunch of easy classes where he gets easy A's, he'll get high grades. I would argue, however, that it would be much better for him to sign up for classes where he had to work hard to get a C, and he would learn so much more. So I would much rather my child sign up for a really hard class and work really hard at that class, even if he failed it, than just sign up for some class that he can get an easy A in with no benefit. So the optimal rate for classes is probably to do classes where you get C's, not C's through lack of effort, but C's for the fact that you're out on the frontier of right at where you should be, right? You're learning quickly enough that you're failing. And so the optimal rate of failure is not zero. If your rate of failure is zero, then you're dramatically underperforming your own capacity, right? You are not maximizing your capacity. Now, the rate of failure is also not 100%. You don't want to be in a scenario where you're failing all the time. But if I come across somebody who can't recount some recent failures, that's pretty good evidence to me that here's a person who is dramatically underperforming his potential. And so we need to figure out ways to look at failure and embrace it. So think of a gym analogy, right? If you're in the gym and you never lift weights to failure, you're not optimizing the growth of your muscles. Well, it's no different in life. If you're not doing things that you're failing at, you're not optimizing your growth rate in life. And so you really, really, really want to make certain that you're pushing the boundaries, and that's going to come with failure on occasion. Now, since failure is inevitable for everybody, let's just get rid of all the negativity around it. If you go to the gym and you lift weights and you train your set to failure, you don't get off of the bench upset because I didn't perform the last rep and my spotter had to lift the weight up off my chest. On the contrary, you think, man, I pushed up 225 for 3.5 reps. That was pretty exciting. How exciting. And so it's the same thing with failure, is that the entire idea of failure being something negative is a mental construct that we can just simply choose not to believe and we can choose to destroy. Much of school, unfortunately, especially the industrial school model, teaches us the opposite lesson. But life doesn't teach us the opposite lesson. If you look at a child learning how to walk, the normal process in learning how to walk involves lots and lots of falling over. But the falling over is failure, and yet the failures change over time. So I have 5 children. I've watched them systematically all learn to walk. In the beginning, they stand up and they fall down. Then after a while, they can take a few steps. Then they can take dozens of steps. Then they can run around, but they come across anything that trips them and they fall down. Then they learn how not to be tripped, and you get more and more skilled with walking. Well, it's the same for all of us. And so we need to reject anything. We need to reject entirely the model of failure being a negative thing, and we need to embrace it as a normal part of learning. Now, one quick footnote here that I would emphasize. We need to be cautious that we don't approach failure that could be catastrophic. So if I'm teaching a child, or if I have a child that's learning how to walk, I will not allow that child to learn to walk at the edge of a swimming pool or at the edge of a cliff. So there does need to be an appropriate boundary where we're not going to engage in the kind of failure that can be catastrophic. But as long as we're away from the edge of any potential catastrophe, then we should embrace failure as a normal and wonderful part of life.
That's a really unique perspective, and I tried to maintain that principle in my education by taking as many AP rigorous courses as possible, despite struggling with a few. I think that the principle of struggling is paramount, and it's better than getting straight A's in basic classes because it really pushes you to see what you know and what you can develop. So now, talking about teens, how would your topmost financial advice be for teens?
Adding to what I've already said about investing in yourself, I would just simply supplement that with avoid the big mistakes. So the rules that you need to follow for money are very, very simple. Number one, you need to earn some. And so I've mentioned that already, right? Say yes to a job, say yes to a business, and try things. It's not that hard to start making money. And the key is to start making money. And once you're making money, then you can figure out how to make more money. The pathway to making more money, the most important pathway, is going to involve consistently improving your knowledge, skills, and ability and applying that skill set into something that the marketplace values. And there are a lot of models that I could give for this. Just want to keep it simple and say that you want to develop skills. What I would encourage you is to focus on the hard skills, meaning don't try to fake it. When I was young, I heard all kinds of people warn about getting rich quick. And so I thought, well, I'm never going to pursue a get rich quick scheme. But what I always looked for was the hack, right? The pathway, the hack to say, well, 20 hacks to make more money. Today, I reject all thinking that relates to getting something quick. I don't want something quick. I want something real. And so I'm going to work on the really hard skills and I'm really going to learn it. And if I really learn the material, then the tests are easy. So you talked about, AP exams, things like that. One of the things that for me was fairly magical was when I figured out that basically every subject or course or exam is easy the second or third time through. So the problem is not that this AP exam is difficult. The problem is simply that this AP exam is difficult the first time through. If I take a year and I study this AP exam material and I review and I review and I study, and then I repeat the whole course the next year and I review and I review and I study, and let's say I even did a third year and I took the whole class the third year and I review and I review and I study, then it would be easy the third time through. Now, clearly, we don't have time to do that. But if you have that concept, you can think about how to apply it. So everything is easy when you do it enough times. And so that AP exam, if you start studying the year before that class, and maybe the summer before, you read the entire textbook and you work some practice problems, then every day during the class, you're listening to the lecture and you do the homework. By the time you arrive at that exam, it's an easy 5. Not because the material is easy, but because this is for you personally the second or third time through it. And everything is easy the second or third time through. When you take that mindset, what you do is you build real skills. And you're not working on the hack. You're not trying to find the short-term solution. You're genuinely becoming highly skilled. And when you are genuinely highly skilled, nobody can take that away from you. And so that helps you to earn money. Now, the first thing you have to do to make money is increase your income. So we've talked about that. The second thing that you do is keep your expenses low. And so if you decrease your expenses and keep your expenses low, you can be in great shape. And the key thing here is just to avoid big things that can wipe you out. By the way, I'm giving you the Radical Personal Finance Framework of Wealth here. Everything you can do about money here in 5 points, 10 words. Point number 1 is increase income. Point number 2 is decrease expenses. So when you're young, the key is to not increase your expenses related to consumption unnecessarily. So you want to just practice the skills of keeping your expenses low. The great thing about teen years and college years is that nobody expects you to have money. There's no reason why you should have money. And so it's easy for you to live cheap, even if your income is high. And that creates a lot of capital that can be invested. We've already talked about investing it into yourself. Invest always into whatever the best investment you have is. So if you have good investments into yourself, investing into higher academics, into additional degrees and certifications, investing into skills and classes and things like that, do that. You should also be open to other financial investments, right? Invest into mutual funds, invest into a piece of real estate when you find one. All of those are open to you and should be embraced. Then we want to avoid catastrophe. And so the key thing with avoid catastrophe is don't make the big mistakes. So what are the big mistakes that can wipe you out that are genuinely catastrophic? Number 1, don't either get someone pregnant that you're not married to or don't become pregnant if you are unmarried. Number 2, do not go to prison. Do not commit crime and do not go to prison. And number 3, do not engage in any addictive or illicit behavior. So avoid all addictions. Don't drink, don't do drugs, don't gamble. Avoid addictive things. And if you can just avoid those wipeout risks, life is pretty easy. And the 5th thing is optimize lifestyle. So always with your experiences, try to understand, okay, I've had this set of experiences. Now that I've had this job, how could I go to a different job that I may be better suited for? Or I'm living in this place, what would be a different place where I could spend the same amount of money but get a much higher quality of life? And if you repeat that process consistently over time, you'll do very well.
Yeah, that's some advice to live by. So now for our college teens, what advice do you have for the students trying to reduce the financial burden of college without sacrificing quality education?
I would say the first non-negotiable should simply be, I will not borrow money for college. I see no good reason for any student to ever borrow money for college. Let me explain what I mean by that. I believe firmly in the value of a college education. I believe that it is very important, and I'm a big promoter of academic performance. I believe that the traditional college pathway is to be desired and to be pursued by many people. But not everybody should go to college. The people who should go to college should definitely go to college, and the people who should not go to college should definitely not go to college. And one indication that you are the kind of person who should go to college is the fact that either you can pay to go there or you are paid to go there. So the most highly qualified people who go to college generally find that their finances are pretty easy. I had a sister of mine who got paid every year to go to college. Why? She got good grades. She went to college. She got a bunch of scholarships. She got one in the honors program. She got paid thousands of dollars a year to go to college. All across the world today, there are many people who get paid thousands or tens of thousands of dollars a year to go to college. So who are those people and how do they find those opportunities? Well, number one, they are very excellent at academics. They may be very excellent at athletics. They have some way where the college values them and the college wants them to be there. And then, of course, we go into other forms of money as well. So they have a lot of scholarships. They have a lot of opportunities. So if you're going to go to a high-cost college, then you need to make certain that that college will pay you to be there or that you have plenty of scholarships to pay the way. The best money-making opportunity that exists for teens is to be good at academics and to have other hobbies and interests and to apply for lots of scholarships and to get them. That's it. So if you have lots of scholarships to go to an expensive school, go. Now, what about for those who don't? Imagine that you're 18 or 19 years old and you have no money for college and no college has just opened up its checkbook and said, hey, we'll pay you to come here and you don't have any scholarships. Should you still go to college? My answer is yes, but you should work your way through. How do you do that? Well, first and foremost, there are the obvious, easy local paths. Anywhere in the United States, any student can work his way through with a part-time job and pay cash for his tuition at a local school. So you start out at a local school, might be a local community college, might be a local government college, might be a local private college, doesn't really matter, but you can work your way through and pay your way. It's totally doable. And then as you do that, you'll build confidence in your decision to pursue academics. What will happen is as you do that, as you get good grades, you may transfer to a more expensive school. And now you apply for scholarships. Now they want you. And so they give you a better offer, something like that. And so anybody anywhere can pay his way through school with working part-time. Even if it takes you longer, it's much better for you to work part-time and for it to take you longer than for you to go to school and to get debt. And that's especially key if you need a job on the other side, because just having a college degree is not sufficient to assure you of getting a job. Most jobs, you're going to need a college degree in the relevant field and work experience. And so let's say that you're going to pursue something like an engineering degree, and it takes you 6 years to work your way through the engineering degree. But during that 6 years, not only do you get the education, but you also have various jobs. It'll be relatively easy for you at the end of 6 years for you to come out the other side and get a job paying $80,000 a year to this engineer because you have the relevant work experience. If you went through in 4 years and you borrowed a bunch of money on student loans so you could finish in 4 years, but you didn't have the work experience, then you would have to go get the work experience first. And so you're going to spend that first 2 years out of college trying to figure out how to get work experience so you can get the real job. And meanwhile, you got to make payments on the student loans. So that's the second pathway. The next pathway is to recognize that with the advent of online education, there is an enormous range of options available to you to go to college and get a degree that is fast, easy, and cheap. So you could do what's called competency-based education. And competency-based education is not restrained by the number of hours that you sit in a classroom, but rather by your ability to pass the relevant exams. And so there are universities that will allow you to come to that university. These are all online. They'll allow you to come to that university. They'll allow you to enroll there, and you pay tuition based upon the amount of time, not based upon the number of credit hours. So the most famous of these would be a program like Western Governors University, although there are others. In fact, there are more all the time, even from name brand schools. But the way that a program like Western Governors University works is you pay some thousands of dollars for 6 months of tuition. And during that 6 months, you can take as many classes as you are able to pass during that 6 months. And so many people who do this find that they can complete all of the education requirements for a bachelor's degree over the course of even, say, 12 to 18 months, sometimes even faster. And then even entering into these degrees, there are all kinds of ways that you can take low cost and free classes and exams that will get you lots of credits. So that would involve AP exams, CLEP exams. There are all kinds of online things like Sailor.org, Study.com, things like that, where you can enroll in those classes and get free credits that will transfer in. And so pursuing a pathway like this is open to anybody. And then finally, all around the country and the world, there are tuition-free education options. And so there are free online universities that will give you an accredited degree with one of those universities. I don't ordinarily recommend these because they're not as effective as other options are, but even all around the world, there are tuition-free universities. So I like to point out to people, in the country of Germany, for example, if you can get accepted to a German university, then even foreign students can go to a university in Germany without any tuition expenses. You still have to pay room and board, but there's no tuition expenses. And so for anybody who wants to go to college, there are ways to go to college, and there's never a reason to borrow money for college. And so you will learn by pursuing it and doing the hard work. You will demonstrate to yourself that you have the commitment to do it, and you're the kind of person who absolutely should go to college, and it'll be a great decision for you.
That's great advice, and I think it will be very insightful for teenagers, especially those with limited financial resources. So now, do you have any other practical tips for someone looking at finance-related jobs after college?
The most important tip I would give is to really engage with your internships seriously. So the biggest mistake that I made during college was that I was very financially stressed in college. I didn't have a lot of scholarships, and I went to an expensive private school. So my freshman year, I worked my way through. I had 3 different jobs trying to work my way through, and I spent all my time working for money rather than working for experience. And I heard about people who went and did internships where they worked for free, and I couldn't imagine how anybody could do that because I need money. In hindsight, I missed out on the exposure that I desperately would have benefited from of doing lots of internships. So again, if I were coaching me today, I would not necessarily try to graduate in 4 years. On the contrary, I would extend it if I needed to. And during that time, I would pursue internships. A good internship gives you exposure and access to people and ideas and contacts in a way that nothing else does. And college is a very special time in life where all of these opportunities are thrown at you, and it's expected that you can apply for them. And the competition is much lower than it will be later on down the road. And everyone's willing to help you. If you roll up as a 30-year-old man and you go up to a big finance company, you say, hey, I'd like to come and hang out with you guys every day and meet everybody and ask everybody for help constantly and not do very much productive work and just see how things work. Nobody says yes to that for 30-year-old men. But for 20-year-old men, they do. They say, oh, come on in. We'll show you the place and we'll give you a few jobs here and there. But basically, you're here hanging out, making connections, learning a little bit, making contacts. So you really, really, really want to engage with internships. And you want to be strategic about using internships to expose yourself to many different aspects of business. So if you're interested in finance, right, you should have a goal of doing an internship or a job that is focused on, say, the customer side. So you might do a sales-oriented internship. You might try one on the technical side. You might do a quant internship. You might try a banking side. You might try an investment side. Try to get exposure to different aspects of the business. And if you've done 2 or 3 or 4 internships, you'll be so well positioned to know what you're attracted to and what you're not attracted to, that now when you're finished with those internships, you can really make progress in your career.
Wow, that's really fascinating. I think many teenagers underestimate the value that internships can have, especially for giving real-world experience, especially if you aren't fully sure exactly which field you'd like to pursue. So now on to my final question. If teens take away just one lesson from today's conversation, what should it be and why?
All skills are learnable, regardless of where you start. If you lay out a plan of where you want to go and you start working on that plan, you can learn all of the skills. You can learn all of the knowledge. You can develop all of the abilities that you need in that area. Building that confidence takes time. You have to actually start the process and work. And some people can learn these skills fast and some people can learn these skills slow. But the hardest thing for teens is to recognize how much time there is. When you are young, it's hard to make long-term plans because as you look at life, you have so few years under your belt that every year is a big deal. So for example, for a 15-year-old to make a 10-year plan is basically impossible for you to conceive of. Whereas for me as an almost 40-year-old to make a 10-year plan, I've made various 10-year plans and I can see how much I can do in 10 years. So when you talk to people who are older and they take things like, hey, make a 10-year plan, and you think, that's just crazy. I could never do that. I remember when I was in college and I had friends that were going to medical school. And I thought, 10 years of college, that would be crazy. Like I am done. I am ready to get out and get to work. Well, today I look back and I realize 10 years of college is really not that big of a deal. It's not that big of a deal. And so developing a long time perspective and doing your best to understand that you can accomplish a lot in 10 or 20 years is really key. I spent too much time focusing on what I could accomplish in 10 weeks or 10 months and too little time thinking about what I could accomplish in 10 years. And to be clear, this is totally normal and natural, and I don't think you can experience it until the years have passed. If you're 10 years old and a year passes, that reflects 10% of your life. If you're 90 years old, or if you're 100 years old and a year passes, that represents 1% of your life. So it's obvious that a 10-year-old and a 100-year-old are going to have a very different perspective on what a year means, even though it's the same number of days of the earth revolving around the sun. So you can't fake the experience of it. But what you can do is you can harness the wisdom of it, and you can force yourself to be patient. So give yourself lots of time. What I have found is that in my life, there's not a single goal that I have ever set that I have been unable to accomplish. But I have almost always needed more time to accomplish the goals that I have set than I originally planned. And that's okay. So every goal that I've set, I could do it. It's just that I set it and I said, I'll do this in 6 months or a year. And in fact, I needed 2 years or 3 years to accomplish it. And to me, that's okay. It's much, much better to be focused on accomplishing the goal, no matter how long it takes, rather than focusing on getting it done in the short term.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mr. Sheats. I really appreciate you taking time out today and your guidance for our teens. I truly enjoyed speaking with you, and it was a learning experience for me as well. And guys, I'm sure you enjoyed this episode too. Make sure to share it with your friends and keep listening to MoneyWise with Krish. And remember, we need to make a smart relationship with our money.